Hey, Driven Youth, this is the 33rd installment of the Exile Challenge, and probably we should change the title to the Exodus Challenge. That we are going to exit from our homes where we've been in quarantine, and we are going to go out, exit those homes to assemble together as God's people, the church. And I can't wait to do that. And I know I'm dating this video, but we're going to do that on May the 24th, and I'm looking forward to it. Interesting fact that probably has no connection at all, right? So, and it ties into Ezra chapter 1. So I'll get to that in a second, maybe if I remember. So in Ezra chapter 1, what is the main theme, or I guess devotional thought we should gather from Ezra chapter 1? And I think there's several things, and I'd be interested and curious to hear from you guys what you had thought. I know many of us don't go to Ezra on a regular basis to do our devotions, but I think it's a good exercise to go back to the Old Testament, to hear from God, and to listen to His Word and have Him speak to us through His Word, through this ancient document, the book of Ezra, that depicts what happened to the children of Israel after this exile period that they were in. And Ezra chapter 1 is the fulfillment of prophecy that was given to Jeremiah, that was given to Isaiah, that was given to Daniel to some extent, of the children of Israel who were being punished for their wickedness, their evil acts in the land, for being unfaithful to the covenant that God established with them, that relationship. And as a result of their unfaithfulness, God informed them long ago that He would take them out of the land. And He did just that. And He did that through King Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian king and emperor. King Nebuchadnezzar, in around 606 BC, captures Jerusalem. He takes many exiles out of that city, out of the land of Judah, and brings them to Babylon into exile. And the first deportation that took place, Daniel was one of those guys who was brought out. So during that first deportation was the aristocrats, was the leaders, were the leaders. Those were maybe a little bit more wealthy. And so King Nebuchadnezzar takes them out in about 606 BC, which I believe starts the clock concerning the prophecy that the children of Israel would be in exile for 70 years. And so Jeremiah chapter 25 declares that the children of Israel would be in exile for 70 years. And let me read that to you. Okay, it says, "This whole land shall become a ruin and a waste." This is Jeremiah 25, 11 and 12. "This whole land shall become a ruin and a waste, and these nations shall serve the king of Babylon 70 years. Then," verse 12, "after 70 years are completed, I will punish the king of Babylon and that nation, the land of the Chaldeans, for their iniquity, declares the Lord, making the land an everlasting waste." There's several other verses as well in Jeremiah that talk about the 70 years. Even in Isaiah, it talks about these 70 years. But one in particular I think is real interesting, that in Isaiah 44, verse 28, it talks about the person who would be used to sack Babylon. And it says this in Isaiah 44, 28. "Who says of Cyrus, he is my shepherd, and he shall fulfill all my purpose, saying of Jerusalem, she shall be built, and of the temple, your foundation shall be laid." And then in chapter 45, verse 1, it says, "Thus says the Lord to His anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have grasped, to subdue nations before him, and to loose the belts of kings, to open doors before him, that gates may not be closed. Let's see. And so God, through the prophet Isaiah, prophesies that not only will the Jewish people be brought into captivity for 70 years, a specific date, time period, but also gives the specific ruler who would come and sack Babylon. Wow, that's pretty incredible right there. God is faithful. And so what we then have in Ezra chapter 1 is this: in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled. The Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, so that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom and also put it in writing. And then he goes on to describe the edict or the decree. And so we have right here the faithfulness of God being demonstrated in Ezra chapter 1 to the children of Israel. That after these 70 years that was prophesied, that the children of Israel will be in captivity for 70 years, and that was through the mouth of Jeremiah the prophet as well as Isaiah, that they would be brought out by King Cyrus, Isaiah chapter 40, 44, verse 28, 45, verse 1. That's incredible. God is faithful to his promises. Okay, just absolutely amazing what's taking place here. And so the 70 years here was also mentioned in Daniel chapter 9, I think around verse 2. It was in Daniel chapter 9, verse 2 or 3. It talks about Daniel reading the scriptures, and he's reading none other than Jeremiah. And so Daniel, while he was in captivity, and Daniel, remember, was around during the time of King Cyrus's capturing of Babylon. And he recognized as he was doing his calculations that, man, the time is coming where God's prophecy of the 70-year captivity was going to be fulfilled. And he was praying at that point, oh Lord, please forgive the sins of my people. Forgive my sins. And so anyways, and we see the final fulfillment of God's 70-year exile that he promised that would occur to his people right here in Ezra chapter 1. And he uses King Cyrus, a pagan king, as his servant to bring his people back to the land. All right? And so if you wanted to, you could calculate the time period. It's still really difficult to know exactly the time frame because our dates aren't perfect. So they're a little bit of an estimation of when these things occur. So if the children of Israel were captured in 606, or some of them were put in exile in 606, and that's when the clock started of the 70 years, then you have I'll do it this way, from 606 BC, that would take that down to about 536 BC or 537 BC, somewhere around there. Okay? And so that would be the 70 years. If King Cyrus came in and sacked Babylon around October of 539 BC, that's when scholars believe he did come in. They're pretty certain about that date. October of 539 BC. You might say, well, there's not enough time for 70 years. And that's possible. But if he then, within that first year, which Ezra says in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, makes a decree in 538 BC for the children of Israel to go back to the land, then there's going to be some time for the children of Israel to prep. So one, it's not like Cyrus came in 539 BC and he says, okay, the children of Israel are allowed to go back. So there had to be some time, at least during that first year, before he made that decree. And so he makes the decree late, I would assume, in 538 BC. And then it's not as if the children of Israel then said, okay, we heard the decree, let's go. Because their whole purpose of going was to rebuild the temple. So what do they need? They need supplies. They need supplies from the treasury. They need building materials. They need paperwork. They need a plan to develop. So it wasn't just a simple trek across the desert by plane or by train or automobile. No, there had to be much time of preparation to take place before the children of Israel just went off on an excursion to Jerusalem. Most of them hadn't even been there before, right? And from Babylon all the way up the Fertile Crescent, for those of you who remember in your study of history, all the way up the Fertile Crescent down to Jerusalem would have taken anywhere between 3 to 5 months, and probably touching more close to 5 months for people to get there. Okay, so this was a long period of time before they could go. So it could have been a year, year and a half before the children of Israel were left, which could have meant that they didn't leave until 586 BC, which would have been that 70 years right there. So anyways, just wanted to throw my thought process on the chronology of how that all took place. So God is faithful to his promises. That 70 years was up and then they left. God's timing is perfect. God is faithful and God's timing is perfect. There's so much more I would love to share with you about this chapter, but I know I've gone on way too long. But just as a reminder, as we find in the book of Lamentations, Jeremiah wrote that, the book of Lamentations, chapter 3, it says that God's mercies are new every morning. Great is his faithfulness. Great is his faithfulness to God's people, to us. And we're so thankful for that. God is going to fulfill his promises. Here's my interesting thought. Okay, and it's done. But so it was 70 years that the children of Israel were in captivity, and they were unable to assemble together and worship for 70 years. And then finally, at the end of that 70 years, they were able to go, and they were brought back into the land to assemble for worship. Don't you think it's interesting that on March the 15th, that was our last time we were together assembling in worship. And so from March the 16th all the way to March the 24th, May the 24th. Do you know how many days that is? That's 70 days. Is it a coincidence? I think it is, but I thought it was interesting that it is going to be on the 24th, 70 days since you and I will have been together. Okay? So let's come together and rejoice and celebrate in God's faithfulness to us, that he's allowing us to come back together and to assemble as God's people, to worship him together. All right, well, I know this video went too long, but God bless you guys. Keep reading Ezra chapter 1. Tomorrow will be Ezra chapter 2. Have a wonderful day, and God bless you.